of this happening are, of course, quite significant. This means that if we had lost power supply to those conveyor belts feeding coal to Letaba, we would have run out of coal at the power station after 6 hours. That is the capacity of the bunkers at the power station. This would then have caused us to lose our most reliable unit at this point in time, a loss of about 3,600 megawatts, and would have put us into much worse than stage 4 load shedding, probably stage 6 load shedding, through a deliberate act of sabotage. And you will note that I am now calling this for what it is. For some time we have had suspicious incidents, but I think this is the clearest indication that we have had to date that there are individuals out there who seek to really damage the economy by causing very significant and substantial load shedding. We have reported the matter to the Hawks. The Hawks are assisting us in investigation. Supply of electricity has in the interim been restored. We were fortunate, again, to stress that our colleagues from distribution were exceptionally nimble and innovative in order to find a third redundant supply with some very hard work on their side. So my thanks to those Eskom colleagues for coming to the rescue. And we therefore averted a really severe incident at Letaba. At this stage, we have no indication who the potential perpetrators could be. It is, of course, immensely disappointing that there are people who deem it fit to intervene in our electricity supply, challenged as it is in this particular way. But it's clear that these individuals have another agenda. I leave it up to you as the media to investigate, to speculate. That's not our job. Our job is to try and ensure that there is as much electricity on the grid as possible in spite of acts such as these. With that, Sikanati, I'm going to stop and hand over to you to moderate questions, please.
Thank you, Andre. Can I request you, one, to repeat that what happens to load shedding this afternoon, and to again repeat that number of breakdowns? Your reading was quite suspicious. And lastly, this particular damage that you have pointed at now, is it inside a power station or outside the property?
All right, Sikanati, the fact that my reading is suspicious is not an attempt at sabotaging the reading, so my apologies for that. Planned capacity outages, 3,345. Partial unplanned losses, 4,796. Full unplanned losses, 9,756. For total unplanned losses of 14,776. The demand forecast, 26,747. Load shedding will be suspended at 9 o'clock tonight. There will be no load shedding over the weekend unless, of course, there are further losses of major units. And at this point in time, the outlook for next week is also for no load shedding, subject to major units being available. Thank you, Sikanati. Back to you. I see Mariam Issa has a question.
Before you go there, the last part of my question, the damage there, is it inside the power station property or is it on the distribution lines outside?
It is on the distribution lines outside the power station. So this was not an act that happened on the power station site. People may ask, so why don't you patrol? Why don't you station guards at these pylons? We have 390,000 kilometers of transmission and distribution lines in South Africa. It is just not physically possible for us to station a guard at every pylon. That's the nature of what we're dealing with trying to manage this critical infrastructure.
Thank you. Mariam Issa, you have a question. Please unmute yourself and lower your hand while asking the question.
Okay, yes, thank you, Sikonathi. Yeah, I came in a little bit late to this briefing, but I caught the tail end of this serious sabotage. And I just wondered, I mean, do you have, question for Mr. de Ruyter, do you have any idea what could be behind this act? What could the motive be? Do you feel like there is some kind of a campaign to get you out of Eskom, to blame you for the load shedding and to remove you? And what is going to happen if these kind of acts continue? My other question is that the Minister of Energy has alleged that Eskom is responsible for delaying the emergency procurement of power. He makes it sound like the capacity is available immediately. And he insists that this has nothing to do with the controversial car power ship tender, as there were 11 companies involved. Lastly, he has accused you personally of not knowing what you were doing, and says that Eskom has the capacity to get on top of the power constraints issue because it has 45,000 megawatts of installed capacity. I do understand that these are sensitive questions, but I was wondering whether you could respond in any way. Thank you.
Go ahead, André. Thank you, Mariam.
Thanks, Mariam. Yeah, it's difficult to speculate on what is behind this. Apart from the fact that it's clearly incredibly disappointing that there are people in this country who, for whatever reason, deem it fit to deliberately destroy infrastructure with a view of exacerbating load shedding. It is something that I find very hard to believe, but unfortunately, as I've just shown you, the evidence does appear to be at least prima facie incontrovertible. That there is malice afoot and that we need to take action. This is, of course, not only a challenge for Eskom. We have state security agencies, we have law enforcement agencies, and I would suggest that there's a role to play for those agencies as well in bringing the perpetrators of these acts to book. Whether or not these acts are aimed at me personally to make it more difficult for me or to cast further doubt and aspersions on what my team and I are trying to do, I don't know. I don't particularly want to speculate on that. Again, I leave that for the highly qualified opinionistas on this call to investigate and arrive at consequences and conclusions on that. Just some brief comments maybe on the emergency power procurement. As yet, Eskom has not received final documentation from the IPP office, specifically the final power purchase agreement. And of course, we need to know what we are signing up to before we can agree to an agreement. It's a bit difficult to sign an agreement when you don't know what that agreement looks like. The maximum price methodology from NERSA hasn't been finally addressed between NERSA, the IPP office, and the DMRE. So there are some issues on indexation and so forth. Clearly, this is a key element of the commercial arrangements for the indexation. And we would be, I think, remiss in fulfilling our fiduciary duties towards Eskom as a legal entity if we were to enter into agreements without knowing what the key commercial terms are that we are signing up for. And this is therefore not something that we are resisting, but we do have to have all the facts on the table. We have been engaging with the IPP office in this regard for a number of months now. They are fully aware of our need for more information. We have made this known to them, but unfortunately the matter has not yet been resolved. Of course, one also needs to consider various processes that are on the go with regard to some of the emergency power projects, specifically litigation, environmental impact assessments, and so forth. And again, these make it difficult for Eskom as the designated single buyer to sign an agreement, which again, to emphasize, we have not yet seen. So I don't think that Eskom is as far as the emergency power procurement is concerned, that we are the party that is delaying the process. Regarding bid window 5, we are continuing to fulfill all of our internal governance processes, despite, again, not yet having received final documentation from the IPP office. We expect to conclude our internal review on this by March of 2022, which is the required date for completion from our side, according to the IPP office's program milestones. So again, we are in full compliance as Eskom with the requirements from the IPP office. The IPP office, we understand, are aiming to seek for approval from their side in March 2022. So I think we are not holding up the program. We are trying to expedite this. I've repeatedly said we welcome the additional capacity that will be created by bid window 5. And we have absolutely no interest in delaying new capacity from coming onto the grid, obviously at reasonably commercial terms that we can justify. Also, I don't have any particular desire to be designated a delinquent director by agreeing to a contract that we haven't seen and where the commercial terms are not fully understood. Grid access and capacity, I don't believe is an issue in this particular point in time, because the preferred bidders have connection capacity, which was in fact one of the requirements for them to be selected. So I think, Miriam, hopefully I've answered your questions regarding the procurement process for additional power, both the emergency power procurement as well as bid window 5. Apart from that, I really don't want to get into a public debate with any minister. I leave that to my political principles. Again, I'm appointed by the board, who are in turn appointed by the Minister of Public Enterprises. It is their call to hire and to fire, and the decision is in their hands, and I will obviously abide by their decision, whatever it is. Thanks, Sikanati.
Thank you, Andre, for answering that question that thoroughly. Jan Dilange, please please lower your hand, unmute yourself and ask your question. You are from Media 24, am I correct?
Good morning. I'm just wondering, we've been assured over 12 years of load shedding many times that the blackout is virtually impossible. But sabotage, does that change that forecast or that assurance? Is the system, the National Control Center, able to withstand acts of this nature?
Thank you, Jan. Andre?
Jan, again, I don't want to create any undue alarm. So, can we cope with a concerted attack, and I think it's appropriate to use that word, on a number of key elements of our system simultaneously. I don't think that is a scenario that we want to contemplate. We have mechanisms in place to avoid a total blackout, load shedding being the primary mechanism that we use. But of course, we can only lose so much capacity. So we were able to prevent a significant increase in load shedding as a result of this incident. But we are now, obviously, we are exposed, and that is why I think there is a need for the security agencies and law enforcement agencies to assist Eskom in protecting assets of national importance. These are national key points designated as such by the law, and we really are dependent also on cooperation from those agencies to prevent any further damage. So Jan, no, I don't want to speculate, and I don't want to say what needs to be done to trigger a total blackout. I think giving that type of ammunition to the perpetrators of this type of crime would not be appropriate.
Thank you, Andre. Jan, thank you for the question. If I may just add to Andre's response there, a concern, or rather it is concerning that some of these suspicious incidents have happened inside power stations. So make that of what you will. There are some suspicious incidents that have happened from inside the power stations. Now that would make anyone's job a little more difficult than ordinarily it would be. The next question comes from Terence Creamer of Engineering News. Any update on the Matimba forensic investigation? Terence, I can answer that myself very quickly. We only mentioned this forensic investigation yesterday, and any investigator will know that no effective investigation has ever happened in the public glare and in the glare of the media for it to succeed. So at some point, when there is anything or when there is enough to say, we will communicate whatever update we can with regards not only to Matimba, but as you now know, the whole system of electricity in South Africa. Banele, that must be Gininza from Business Report, has a question. Other than the evidence of sabotage before you, has there been any ransom demands, as in communication of displeasure with Eskom, unless certain demands or restorations have been made? Andre, do you want to comment on that?
Banele, short answer, no. No ransom demands or any blackmail of any sort has been put forward.
Thank you. Nandika from Hot 1.102.7 FM wants to know, are there CCTV cameras that can help stem incidents of sabotage such as this and identify perpetrators? Nandika, the distance between Johannesburg and Cape Town, for example, is about 1,600 kilometers. 390,000 kilometers of Eskom wire is what we have in this country. I'm not sure that there can be cameras in every corner and a security guard or policeman at every one of those. Want to comment on that? Right?
Yeah, where we have a risk of economic crime, and we understand that some economic crime is driven by the very high levels of poverty and inequality that we have in the country. We have known hotspots where, for example, tower members get stolen. Typically what the criminals do in these instances is that they do not collapse the tower in the way that this has happened, but they will remove one or two members, thereby weakening the structural integrity of the tower or the pylon, but they will not topple the pylon. And we know where those areas are, where we are at risk, and we have stepped up our security patrols in those areas. This particular incident took place in an area where we have never in the past experienced any sort of this criminal activity. And again, to emphasize that at the site, nothing was stolen, which certainly would seem to suggest that there was no economic motive. With other words, people weren't trying to topple the tower in order to gain access to metal that they could then sell as scrap metal. This is clearly not the case, and we are therefore, I think, in a different category of crime here. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. The next question comes from Banele again. Some SOEs, like Transnet, have engaged the use of drone technology and more boots on the ground. Is Eskom relying on law enforcement only, or is it doing more to secure its assets? May we have more detail, please, because we have asked this before. Thank you. Banele, you missed the answer to this question yesterday, in particular, when Andre spoke about increased security measures engaged on by Eskom itself, those drones that we spoke about, and other security measures. But I'll let him repeat the question for the answer for your benefit. But before that, let's read your next part of the question, please. What sort of budget is being put into the security measures, and now that it is clear Eskom has to engage in war with saboteurs? Andre?
So first of all, the measures that we're taking are, I think, very innovative. We have deployed drones that are obviously remotely controlled to patrol the areas around our power stations. These drones are equipped also with infrared cameras at night to spot where there are people loitering with intent. We have had significant successes in preventing cable theft around our power stations with this drone technology. We've also stepped up our access control. We, as I said yesterday, we've stepped up the installation of intelligent cameras that can recognize untoward behavior and that can flag when there is someone in an area where he or she should not be. So we are stepping up our security measures in addition to more patrols, getting independent and new security companies on site to ensure that, for example, in the case of Tutuka, where we had significant theft of fuel oil, order of magnitude estimate is about 100 million rand a month, that was stopped through the introduction of a new security company. So we have stepped up our measures. At this point in time, I'm not going to disclose what the budget is. Again, we are engaged in campaign against criminals, and disclosing too much information obviously does not assist us in stopping and apprehending these criminals. So I don't want to disclose too much in that regard.
I see no further hands, colleagues. So if anyone still has any unanswered question, please do write it down.
Terence raised a question.
Yeah, we're going on there. We are going on there, and right here, there you go, Terence. Does Eskom have a clear strategy to enable it to absorb the climate finance offer, should it become a firm transaction? What is the National Treasury's response to that strategy? Okay, Banele, I noted your point. Thank you.
Right, Terence, yes, we do have a clear strategy with regard to the potential availability, and I have to stress that it is still potential, availability of concessional financing to assist us in our decarbonisation program. We have identified a number of projects on the generation, transmission and distribution side that we wish to carry out with the assistance of this concessional financing. Of course, the expansion of our transmission grid and the strengthening of our distribution grid are key initiatives to allow more generation capacity, and in particular renewable generation capacity, to come onto the grid as soon as we can. So these interventions need funds and they require support, and therefore we have welcomed the announcement at COP of some 131 billion or 8.5 billion US dollars for the decarbonization program in South Africa, including but not exclusively for Eskom. It is important to point out that the political announcement that was made at COP was an intergovernmental announcement. The process to now negotiate agreements will be led by a technical task team that is going to be driven by a number of officials from various government departments. It is being led by a number of ministers who are involved in overseeing this process and giving the necessary guidance. And Eskom, of course, looks forward to the conclusion of that process in order for us to start with this very important and urgent program of being able to accommodate new generation capacity onto the grid. I cannot give you any feedback at this point in time on the position of National Treasury. We have engaged them a number of times on this just energy transition facility that we have put in place, so they are fully informed, but I think that question is probably best directed at National Treasury. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Thanks for the question, Terence. Quite refreshing to get a different voice. Khumulimo from UFM. Please do unmute yourself and talk to us. Lower your hand as well. Thank you. Khumulimo, the nation awaits your wisdom. Khumulimo, there's an echo coming. Someone is unmuted. Please unmute yourself and speak. Colleagues, kindly unmute Khumulimo. He's unmuted that side. Right. Let's write it down. Write it on the chat impression so we can answer it. Did I see your hand rising, Kyle? Okay, Khumulimo, just do write a WhatsApp to me if you are unable to get through this. Colleagues, I shall end it here then. This is the end of the briefing. If there is one last question, I will tackle it. Mercedes, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you. There are, Mercedes, please can I ask you to unmute yourself and ask your question, identifying yourself in the process. All right, that is the end, colleagues. Andre, any closing remarks, please?
Thank you very much again for your interest in Eskom. Thank you for your continued scrutiny over this very important entity. Again, I wish to issue an appeal for every electricity user in South Africa to use electricity wisely and carefully. Even though we have exited load shedding, the system does remain constrained, and your positive contribution by using electricity wisely can really make a difference to the stability of the system. So I would really appreciate it if members of the media were also to include that in your communication. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, thank you. We will prepare and distribute a media statement to the effect that load shedding will be suspended at 9 p.m. And we will share those photographs as well. And I will appreciate it if I only received, I suspect there will be quite a lot of interest. So let's keep them to writing, please, the questions. Thank you. Have a nice day, colleagues.